look here.
Live
Record.
transcript.
Yeah.
Oh, it says that you're recording it already.
I know. I just turned it on for a second.
Oh, okay. So it says live transcript and it says closed caption.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So just
you want
select
me to
that.
click on that?
Pardon?
So you want me to click on that?
Definitely. When you start to record, go ahead and.
Okay. So
yeah.
I'll just and I'll just wait. Here we go. I'll just wait for your prompt to record. I won't. Whatever it is, will be fine. We're
Okay.
okay.
Okay. That sounds good. Okay, and we're pretty much on time, but what was I going to say? Oh, Kim was saying that Marty contacted a contact that he had given in the class who had a winery, and they went and they had this great experience and stuff. And I, in my mind, was thinking of your Marty, but it was Marty Rosen. And Barry.
Oh, right. Yes. Well, they're good friends of ours too. So yeah.
Okay, I'll put my slideshow up.
Okay, great. I'll let people in a minute soon. I mean, let's see. It's 5:55. Should I?
Yeah. Go ahead. I think so.
Did you make me a co-host?
Oh, not again. Let me see here.
Okay.
Yeah, and also originally I did. Okay, there you are. Okay, and I can put that up. I'll just go like this. Look right, Marcy?
Yes, that's great.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
I don't know what's going on, but I cannot.
Mute.
I can't.
Why don't you just wait
not
till they
hear
start?
everybody.
It says, please read while you wait. We'll begin at 6 p.m. So they haven't started yet.
Yeah,
But you're
but you
on
can-
here.
We can hear you, Ron.
I'll give it.
I unmuted.
Well, welcome everybody. Glad to see folks popping in from the waiting room. Hopefully you had a chance to review Zoom techniques. I think most of us are pretty up to speed on it. Just as a review, please try to keep yourself on mute. If you get off of mute, we might come in and mute you during the presentation. Also, it's less distracting during the presentation if you don't have your video on. During the question and answer, feel free to turn on your video if you want. If you have questions during the presentation, just drop them into the chat, which is at the window at the bottom if you have a computer or a device, or else just touch around the edges of your screen and those commands for the chat should come up, as well as the mute and video and things like that. You probably are all aware, but just as a review. So before we get started, let's see here. I wanted to start, this is a community education class from the Land Steward program, and we really like to begin our classes before we start with an acknowledgement of the original land stewards. Wherever we are on native lands, and I'm coming from Ashland, Oregon. You all can be from all different places, but in Ashland we are on the traditional lands of the Takelma, Shasta, and Letgawa people, who were forcibly removed and to whom we owe an unpaid debt of land, culture, and history. If you want to explore more about native land where you are, this website is a useful website, and I will pop that into the chat once I turn over the reins to our presenter this evening. Okay, so we are going to be recording this, and you'll receive a link to the recording sometime tomorrow. And if you have any other ideas about classes or instructors, feel free to drop them in the chat, or you can personally chat me in the chat and give me ideas, and I will share that with our planning group. So, as I mentioned, this is a presentation of our Land Steward Program's Community Education Series. We put this together with the help of a volunteer planning committee. Marcy Kaminker is our chair of our planning committee, and she is the co-host on this, and I just want to let you know that, because if anything goes wrong with my internet, she would take the reins and take over as the host of your class. If you want to find out about upcoming classes from the Land Steward program, you can just Google OSU Land Stewards and come to our website, and you just go to this check arrow, and then you'd get onto our email list that just announces upcoming classes. Coming up in April, we have the Pesticide Stewardship Project update with Gordon Jones in April 26th. And I just wanted to share with you, if you go to our website and the events page, you can find other events that we have coming up or related events from similar programs. So our Collins Forestry Field Days is a series that you might be interested in finding out more about, kind of field days on our new experimental forest that's near Gold Hill. Okay, so tonight we are going to have a presentation from Herb Johnson, and he's been a wildland firefighter for 24 years, and for 19 years he's worked for the Oregon Department of Forestry in Southwest Oregon. For 11 years he has been the coordinator of the Firewise USA and for the Fuels Reduction Grant. So he's a really good resource to know about, and he's going to be sharing with us how we can get ready for this coming summer. As I've been saying lately, summer is coming. So with that, I'm going to stop my share. And let's see. So I think, Herb, you should be able to unmute and come back in. He might just be getting ready here. Okay, that's great. Okay, Herb, we're ready for you when you're ready. Okay.
Yeah, it just takes a second to get up there and push buttons.
Okay.
Good evening. Like Rachel said, my name is Herb Johnson. Currently a forest officer is my title, involved in prevention and aviation here in the Medford unit of Southwest Oregon. Yeah, I think I signed up for this a while ago. I'm going into season number 26 in wildland fire, and you know, add 2 years to all those stats there. And you know, I've been involved in fuels reduction, you know, throughout my whole career. Started with a private contractor just out in the woods, doing thinning, forest health restoration, prescribed fire, things like that. And I've been asked to make a presentation about construction standards as they apply to wildland fire survivability for your structures. And then I'm going to talk about forest health, fuels reduction, things like that. So I think the first thing we'll look at is from the Firewise USA program. And it's a little rundown of the Firewise program breaks the structure and the surrounding area into zones. We'll call the home ignition zone is the overall the home and its surrounding environment as it pertains to wildfire. So here's this. Share. Okay. So let's get rid of this stuff and this stuff, make it clean. Okay, so these are some real basic illustrations. If everyone can see my cursor, we have the home itself. So the home itself is broken down into several zones where ignition from a wildfire is possible. It's from the peak of the roof down to the eaves is one. From the eaves down to the foundation is another zone. And then from the foundation out 5 feet is another zone. So there's various things within these zones that can cause your home to ignite and then burn in a wildfire. And we'll get into those a little bit later. The immediate zone, that's 0 to 5 feet. What I tell people when I come out and inspect their home in that 0 to 5 feet is ideally you want absolutely nothing combustible. No landscaping, no plants, just nothing. Rock, maybe green lawn if you want the lawn to come all the way up to your house. Just check on the chat really quick. Make sure there's not. Okay, good. Just some links. So yeah, that immediate zone 0 to 5 feet, ideally nothing combustible. Certainly things like a lot of people will have bark mulch in there. I see a lot of houses where, people want to plant their landscaping right up against their house. I like to tell people, kind of candidly, it's almost like people will go and build a house in the woods and then they're ashamed of having a structure out there. So they try to hide it with as much landscaping as they can. And that can be pretty dangerous to have. And then this intermediate zone 5 to 30 feet here. This is where if you want to do some landscaping, that's not a bad place to have your landscaping. We still recommend plants that are free of waxes, resins, and oils. We have lists. The OSU has produced some really great materials, and they're continually being updated on fire resistant plants. Some are for privacy, so they have some fire resistant plants that will hedge or provide some screen. And then also how much water, sun. They say they're deer, whether they're deer resistant or not, which anyone who's lived here long enough knows that deer will eat almost everything. But yeah, so really good publications there. And we do recommend within that 5 to 30 feet that, it's minimal. You don't want a lot of stuff, a lot of plants in that zone. And then the extended zone, out to 100 feet, and really here in Southwest Oregon, which we'll see with some another checklist that I developed. along with Kara Baylog, who works for OSU. Just checking on the chat again.
Herb, I'll track the chat for you. Don't worry about it. If there's
Okay.
something you need to know, I'll interrupt. Otherwise, I'll just put some
Okay.
links in if it's useful. Yep.
Yeah, good deal. So yeah, just yell at me if something goes awry. So that 30 to 100 feet, and really here in Southwest Oregon, that home ignition zone, we extended out to 200 feet due to the, the frequency of fire, the intensity of fire. Also, if your home is on a slope or something, you want as much separation as you can get. So in that 30 to 100 foot zone, we'll scroll down. You can see there's not really much in there. This is not representative of a lot of our properties here. But you can see there's just not a lot of vegetation in there at all. And so this is some general recommendations that, Firewise USA is a national program. So you can see here, for example, out here in this 5 to 30 feet zone, they want 18 feet between the crowns of the trees. And anybody who lives in the forest and has, mature conifer trees, you're basically going to have to log your property to get it to that spacing. It's kind of case by case, but in general, if we can remove the ladder fuels, the lower limbs, if you have mature trees and the lower limbs are removed for 15 feet, it's okay for me for the branches to almost touch from one tree to another. Is what we call that is a shaded fuel break. And it helps out to have shade on the ground. It keeps the underbrush and stuff from growing. It keeps the fuel temperatures just that little bit cooler. Fire burns a little bit less intensely in the shade as opposed to in the sun. So there's some nuance to how many trees and what that should look like. And then out here 30 to 60 feet again, they're saying 12 feet, and then 60 to 100 feet, 6 feet between the crowns. What I look at as far as spacing is we measure from the trunk, and it's typically removing the smaller trees and spacing them out maybe 15 feet apart between the trunks. Again, it's okay to have some the branches a little bit closer together. There is something to be said for this 5 to 30 foot, really just having fewer trees in there. And if I were building from the ground up on a blank slate, I'm not going to plant my trees so close together that that we don't have some sort of separation. But again, living in the forest with existing mature trees, it doesn't make sense to go in there and take out logs. It's not going to help all that much. But a lot of this stuff is good. Heavy accumulations of ground litter, debris, ladder fuels, things like that. So this is a sample of what's available through the Firewise program as far as educational materials. You all could go to this website, firewise.org, and kind of scroll through it. There's some brochures that I order. If you have an NFPA login, you can order those. That's typically your fire department's community emergency response, volunteer groups, things like that. But these materials are all available locally. If anyone was interested, we could get you linked up with that. So with all of that being said, I'm gonna show you a quick video. It's about 4 minutes long. So there's a guy called Jack Cohen who is widely recognized as kind of the godfather of some of these Firewise principles. So, it wasn't very long ago that it was just widely accepted that homes burned because there was a flame front, a large fire, and just a big, flame front comes and swallows up homes. But what they've actually learned through research is that over 95% of homes burn from embers. It could be a fire a half mile away dropping embers on your house. And that home ignition zone, that's why they really focused on the structure itself in the first 30 feet out from your house being as non-combustible as possible. So we'll watch this video really quick. I gotta share it first. Are we seeing my screen yet with the YouTube video?
Not yet. We just see
Okay.
you there.
I'm here. Okay. 1 second. Oh, no, you stop. Okay. All right, that should be good. Are you guys seeing that YouTube screen?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, this is
Uncontrolled extreme wildfires are
my
inevitable.
mistake.
These are the conditions when wildland urban interface does
This one.
We also have an ignition now under the deck, very near the door. If you look on this monitor, the left monitor, you can see now fire spreading up the door. We now have siding on fire on the side of the house. We have fire underneath the deck, and you can see how quickly this spreads.
We're in the test chamber, I guess you would call it.
Absolutely. We're at the test chamber here in Richburg, South Carolina, for the
at
Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. So in this chamber right here, we can generate winds as much as 140 miles an hour. We do a lot of testing on hurricanes and wind-driven rain. Today, all of that power is getting turned towards wildfire. And so we'll be generating those embers that drive so much of the fire ignitions that we see in wildfire events. The winds today, probably only 20-25 miles an hour that we put in motion, but you're gonna see just how these embers pick up and loft and move down that road towards this home. And you'll see two different ways that it's constructed in this duplex today. One that has the best practices that we know, that put in a whole series of defenses against wildfires, and another one that is often kind of typical cabin style building that people would like to have because they love the way it looks and the way it feels, but it's highly susceptible to wildfire.
Okay. Previously, IBHS has tested the effects of hailstorms and simulated hurricanes, and I remember there was a lot of science that went into making the hailstones because you wanted them to be as authentic and close to the real thing as possible. So you tried seltzer water and tap water and all these different things. Did that much go into creating these embers?
So it does, and so very different science, obviously, on what we're creating on hailstones. In this case, you take a walk over and look at this. There are ember generators, and we see that embers come in different kinds of shapes and sizes. They can be the small spark you might see when you're roasting a marshmallow at a campfire. They can be the size of a thumbnail or a thumb, the size of a hand, and so we'll generate those very different profiles of embers that will pick up and loft, and the wind will just take and do that. So the science here is making sure it resembles what we've seen on the ground. We go out, we were out in Paradise, California after that wildfire this past fall, and you'll see those same kind of attributes in place. And then the way things are constructed here is really the place where the science has come to bear here. We know what kind of wall siding, what kind of windows, what kind of doors, what you need to do in your gutters, the attic vents as well as the crawl space vents. All of that is where the science is going to be on full display today.
Jack is also configured to resist ember ignitions. And we have our 5-foot non-combustible zone material with our rock mulch that surrounds that side. We did have a report there from the chamber teams. We have fire in the attic now. We will probably suppress here shortly. We had a question if we've seen any windows break. The window on the front side still looks intact from the camera angles we have. It wouldn't shock me if the window facing us in the chamber, that's a lot of intense heat right now. It still looks intact. We can't tell if it's cracked or not from here in our vantage point.
Okay, so we saw there that was a little bit different video than the one I had queued up earlier, but just as valid. Hold on one second. All right. So what you saw there was, you know, good house, bad house. One house had bark mulch in the immediate zone, that's 0 to 5 feet. Also, you know, shake siding, a lot, you know, basically everything that you're not supposed to do. And then the other house had nothing combustible in the 0 to 5 feet, fiberboard siding, and it didn't ignite when they threw the embers at it. And I've seen that, you know, on fires quite a bit. I've seen houses with great defensible space where they went out into the woods 200 feet and mowed the grass really short, removed the lower limbs, cleaned everything up. But then, you know, they brought a pile of wood, you know, a small armload of wood up onto their porch at night, or patio furniture with that polyurethane foam cushions, and embers landed in that, and the people were woken up at 3 a.m. with flames shooting under their kitchen door, and they just barely had time to you know, put shoes on and get out while their house burned, which is, you know, it's really a sad situation to go through all that work and you know, take responsibility for thinning your forest and keeping it healthy, but then just get burned by a little minute detail. And that's really what protecting your home from fire is. It's a snapshot in time, and you just always have to be on top of it and make sure that, you know, during fire season especially, you really have your home ignition zone as clean as you can. I've got another checklist I'm going to share with you guys. There it is. Okay. Share screen. This one. Okay. So this is a defensible space worksheet that I developed for a grant-funded high school curriculum, again in partnership with OSU Extension. The graphics and everything that was Cara Baylog. But this is, you know, if everyone were to take this worksheet and apply it to their homes, you'd be in a lot better shape. You look at initial considerations. Is the house on a slope greater than 25%? Yes, extend the defensible space zone to 200 feet. Is it built at the edge of a canyon? If yes, take even more strict measures on vegetation spacing, building materials, and extent of defensible space. Is it built on a south-facing slope? If yes, again, you're probably going to need even a little bit more spacing and a little less combustible material near your home. This is there are a few areas in Jackson County that are actually outside of a structural fire protection district. And there's a lot of Josephine County that is outside of a structural fire protection district. What that means, so most of the forest land or areas where wildfire is a threat, you pay a forest patrol assessment. It's on your tax bill. It's a per acre rate. And then if you have a structure, there's a slight surcharge. For me, I have 6 acres. It's around $60 or $70 a year, and that pays for ODF. Essentially, if you have a wildland fire, ODF will come put it out, and as long as you didn't start the fire due to some sort of negligence or willful maliciousness, there's no charge. There's no charge for that. Your $60 a year will get you the whole complement of resources that we bring to bear: bulldozers, air tankers, all of it. But if your house catches on fire, we are not trained or equipped to come into your house and put it out. So that's where the structural fire district comes in. If you're within one of those, your house catches on fire, the big trucks come and the heroes rush in, and put it out. So if you're not within a structural fire district, strongly recommend having a sprinkler system, non-combustible building materials, and recognize that firefighting resources will not go into saving your home if it is already on fire. ODF will come and do everything they can to keep a wildland fire, from igniting your home. And we will put water on your house if the wall is starting to catch on fire. We'll do everything we can from outside the house, but once it gets inside, there's nothing we can do. So again, the roof peak to eaves, Class A roofing. There's a list of what that is: metal, tile, composition, shingles, concrete. In good repair, that's important. If you have, 3-tab composition roofing and a bunch of them are missing or loose, embers can find a way in there and then ignite the decking under your roof. And that's bad. Once your roof is on fire, it becomes extremely difficult to put your house out. Roofs are designed to shed water. And so I've been on fires where people had cedar shake roofs, and we dropped, water on it with a helicopter for 45 minutes, and the roof just shed the water off and the house burned down. So yeah, needs major work. Cedar shake roof, it's probably going to become illegal in the not too distant future in the wildland urban interface to have a cedar shake roof. And then, like I said, even if you have the appropriate roofing materials, if it's not clear of pine needles, leaves, and things like that, that's fuel. So that's why I recommend cleaning your gutters and you're keeping all the debris off your roof. Soffits, attic vents, and foundations. Every hole into your house, the vents, the foundation vents, all that should be covered with a 1/8 inch metal screen. A lot of houses were built with 1/4 inch mesh, which is a little bit bigger. And they've refined to the standard now to 1/8 inch mesh. We're going to get to decks, but it's the same size metal screen for that. Siding material, obviously cement, stucco, brick, those things are not combustible. In wood, siding is okay, as long as it's in good repair, painted, smooth, no rotten spots, no knot holes, things like that. And then windows, double pane windows will protect your house. We did some of our own little experiments a few years ago down here, where we built small mock-ups, one with a single pane window, one with a double pane window, and we burned them. And basically what happens is the heat will break the pane of glass. And if it's single pane, the heat from the fire breaks the pane of glass, and then embers and everything land inside. And then, once the inside is on fire again, it becomes a really big problem. Double pane windows, sometimes the outer pane would break from the heat, but then typically the fire would die down before it could break the second pane. So it would still keep embers out of your house. So double pane windows are recommended. Really shouldn't have any vegetation under your windows at all. You want to keep those clean. Mulch, that goes without saying. You want the immediate zone, that 0 to 5 feet, to be completely non-combustible. Rock, pea gravel, things like that. Bark mulch, wood chips are highly receptive to embers. So it's really easy when embers land in bark mulch, because of all the little fine fibers in there, that it'll catch and smolder. And then you get a little bit of wind and it'll actually flare up into flames and then spread to your house. Vegetation, well-spaced plants, appropriately irrigated, free of resin, waxes, oil, and dead material. So if you must have vegetation within 5 feet of your house, keep it wet, and don't let the dead leaves accumulate underneath it, because again, embers are going to land in there and could catch fire. And this is all in preparation. What I tell people is for worst case scenario. So, a lot of the times, even if you don't do all of these things, and we have a moderate fire come through, there may be enough firefighting resources that we can just go and suppress the little spot fires that start. But in preparing for worst case scenario, which we experienced in 2020, hopefully no one in this class had to go through that, the loss of a home, but it's possible. There was quite a bit of damage from the 2020 fires. And we would invite you to share any of those experiences later after the presentation. So again, we're preparing for worst case scenario, standalone, assuming no assistance is going to come. These are things that you can do to give your house a really good chance to survive. You definitely, tree limbs overhanging the house is becoming a standard. No tree limbs overhanging the house. If for no other reason than they continually drop needles on your roof, and it's just an ongoing maintenance issue. Fire doesn't typically spread independently through the crowns of the trees. So if you do have tree limbs overhanging your house, and everything's cleaned out underneath the tree, all the ladder fuels, there's not a lot of chance of the crown of that tree burning your house. But again, it's just constant maintenance. That keeping the tree limbs 10 feet away from the chimney is more to keep your wood stove from igniting a wildfire than it is protecting your home from a wildfire. But that's a recommendation, or that's actually written into Senate Bill 360, which is a law that is going away and being replaced by Senate Bill 762, which we will likely get into later. That's a big one. No firewood, lumber, or fuel within 30 feet of the house. So that's huge. You know, a lot of people, I've seen people with a wooden deck, and it's a nice dry place to store all their firewood, which is okay until fire season rolls around. And then you really don't want, you know, lumber piles, firewood, things like that. And I find that as I go through the aftermath of fires, a lot of the places that burn, you know, they'll have just a lot of stuff in the yard, junk cars, things like that. You know, all of that stuff ignites pretty easily, and also becomes a big hazard to the firefighters with the toxic smoke and all that stuff. So you want to really try to keep that clean. Something I do, some people have like a wood storage area and it's attached to their house. So what do? I always try to help people. You know, you just don't always have the resources to tear down your woodshed and move it 30 feet away. So things you can do is just fully enclose that. You can use metal screen, you know, in a pinch, a few good canvas tarps would work, but it's just, you think about embers are the cause. So you want to keep the embers out of your wood pile. So if it is attached to your house, you know, find a way to fully enclose it, at least during fire season. Wooden fencing. So I see a lot of places where it'll be a subdivision or a neighborhood, and they've got just these continuous wooden fences, and they butt up right to the house, and then, you know, to the next house and to the next house. And it's really not a good idea to do that. We recommend breaking, if you have wooden fences, breaking like a 10-foot section where it connects to the house with, you know, a metal fence or something non-combustible. And that's probably going to be codified and written into actual statute sooner than later. Decks are an issue. Typically, when embers land on a flat surface, if the wood's in good repair and well maintained, it'll maybe char into it, but it doesn't usually ignite. But again, if you really want to be safe, you know, get a Trex or something similar deck. Make sure it's well maintained. And then the big thing is keeping the bottom of it screened, so that leaves can't accumulate under there, and then embers can't blow under there and ignite that stuff. If your deck is tall enough to where you can get in there regularly, like say it's a 2nd-story deck, as long as you can get in there regularly and blow out the leaves and anything combustible, then, you know, you don't need to screen, you know, 12 feet higher or whatever. But just think about embers blowing under there. And okay, patio furniture, we talked about the foam cushions. Most foam cushions are made of polyurethane. They burn like gasoline. They really do. So, you know, I have polyurethane cushions on my deck right now. I bought a canvas tarp, so it serves two purposes. In the wintertime, it keeps it from getting wet. Then in the summertime, you throw this canvas tarp over there, and then if embers land on it, you know, it's not going to ignite. If you go out of town, it's a good idea to just stash those cushions inside, or you know, take the patio furniture and put it out away from the house. But I've seen those things burn, and I've seen them cause houses to burn. All right, so getting really in depth into this intermediate zone, good grass, irrigated and mowed, or no grass. So the way the statutes have been written now is that if you have dead grass, that it should be mowed to 4 inches. But again, you know, that what that's going to do is it's going to make it, if you have dead grass and it's mowed 4 inches or shorter, you're going to have low intensity fire. But if nobody's there, let's say we have another worst case scenario year where there's just not enough resources to protect every home, if nobody's there, even 4-inch tall dead grass is eventually going to march up to your house and ignite it. So it's better than nothing. But within that 30 feet, I really, really strongly recommend green grass or no grass. And then again, with the shrubs within that 5 to 30 feet, stay away from the junipers, the cypress, super oily things like that. Keep them well spaced apart and free of dead material. You know, things like even rosemary and lavender are pretty oily, but that's something that can be pruned regularly to keep it from really just going completely crazy and wild. You want to remove limbs of trees up 6 to 10 feet. Trees or clusters of trees spaced at least 12 feet from each other and from the home. So again, this is a little bit different than the Firewise recommends. This has been tailored to kind of our dry conifer forests here in Southwest Oregon. And when we're talking about trees and clusters of trees, usually we're not having people thin or remove anything larger than like 6-inch diameter. But again, within that first 30 feet of your house, if you have just a lot of large trees, it'd probably be a good idea to remove a few. All right, urban fuels and outbuildings, firewood, lumber, junk cars, trash piles, chemicals, etc. Outbuildings, you know, you don't want your outbuildings to burn. So same standards, same needs, keep them clean. Power lines usually are maintained by the power company. The live distribution lines are maintained by the power company. But I see a lot of people with some super questionable, you know, like the 2-phase service drops to their house that the power company doesn't maintain. You know, they're insulated. It's usually two black wires wrapped around a silver colored guide wire. And, you know, I see people have those tacked to trees, all kinds of stuff. What'll happen, those will cause fires if they're contacting any tree branches, because as the wind blows over time, it'll wear holes in the insulation and then they arc. So the power company will maintain the big ticket ones, but those service drops are just good to pay attention to, make sure that they're not touching any tree branches or anything like that. And if it's, you know, actually attached to a tree, you might want to have an electrician come out and move that. Extended zone out to that 100 feet. So real quick, like we call this defensible space. And what defensible space means, it's a little different than the home ignition zone, but you're trying to create a zone where you might still have fire come through there because, you know, not everybody has time to go and rake all the leaves off the ground. And that's really not necessarily a good practice for forest health, to keep the ground completely bare of all the mulch and vegetation. But if you remove the lower limbs, space the trees apart, get the dead material out, things like that, the fire intensity is going to drop when it comes into that. And then it's safer for the firefighters to get in there. Even though there's some fire on the ground, it's not going to have so much radiant heat that it's just unsafe for us to be there. So if you have defensible space, that means that you've removed enough of the fuel to keep the fire out of the trees and on the ground, so we can park a truck in there and deploy some hose and you know, put out the lower intensity fire. So yeah, you know, think about your driveway. If your whole driveway isn't in, you know, the fuels aren't reduced, or there's a bunch of low hanging limbs over your driveway, the big fire trucks that would protect your house in a large fire scenario are not going to be able to get up there. And a lot of times they're not going to feel comfortable going up your driveway if we don't think that we'll be able to get back out. So I always say, make your driveway, invite the firefighters in. Clear the vegetation and fuels 10 feet either side of the driveway is the bare minimum. 10 feet either side of the driveway is the bare minimum. I like to see probably 50 feet on both sides of the driveway where you've gone and done some work, thinning, pruning, stuff like that. Not a clear cut. None of this is ever a clear cut, except for that first 5 feet around your house where we don't want to see anything combustible. Address signs. Usually if your house is on fire or there's a wildfire or something, we have a big smoke column, we can find you, but it's really important to have address signs, especially if you have a medical emergency, and post it so that you can see the address coming from both directions. A lot of people only have the address posted from one direction, usually the direction coming from town or the major city centers. But post it so you can see it from both sides. This is still the 30 to 100 foot zone. Trees limbed up 6 to 10, no more than clear of dead branches. I think this is still a work in progress where they're using that 18 foot number. Oh yeah. So again, there's nuance. Every property is kind of individual, but the big thing is getting the ladder fuels out and then having mature, healthy trees, free of dead material. And 18 feet apart, that's the trunks, not the branches.
Herb, could I just interrupt for a moment? You're
Absolutely.
saying trees and clumps of trees. You mean like a clump of tree kind of acting like a single tree, right? So you can have...
Yeah. So, thank you for that. What we're trying to essentially simulate what fire does in nature, which is, it comes through and it creates holes and openings, and it'll, leave clumps of trees untouched. So, we don't want people to go out there and take a measuring tape and go, okay, I can't have a tree here because I've got a tree here. You can leave three trees, 4 trees in a clump, here and there, and then you can create some openings it's kind of to make it a little bit more natural. And we don't want people to think that they really have to adhere strictly to, trees just have to be 18 feet apart. So that's why. And then a lot of times with things like hardwoods, madrones, and oaks, they kind of grow in clusters. So when we're talking about shrubs, highly combustible shrubs, 18 to 20 feet apart. So when we're locally here, it's the buckbrush and the manzanita are the two most common highly combustible shrubs. There's a lot of other things, ocean spray, 9 bark, that just aren't as combustible. And so, we tend to allow those to be a little bit tighter on the spacing. But when you get into the buckbrush and the manzanita, you really want to space that stuff out and break up the continuity. It's really all about like continuity of fuels. And ladder fuel, when we're talking about ladder fuels, so again, a lot of what we're trying to accomplish with fuels reductions and things like that is we understand that fire is going to happen, and in a lot of cases, fire is a good thing for the environment and for your forest, but we want it to be low intensity. We want it to stay on the ground. So if you have, say, dead grass and then shrubs and then a thicket of young pine trees and then large pine trees, and all these things have just continuity of vertical fuel, the fire is going to just get up into the crowns of the trees. It's going to kill all the vegetation, and it's going to become extremely difficult to put out. So that's when we're talking about ladder fuels. It's the lower branches. It's shrubs immediately under trees, things like that. Some riparian stuff they're talking about there. Irrigated or mowed under 4 inches. Surface fuels, small surface fuels, dead twigs, leaves, needles. We understand there's going to be some of that on the ground, and you need some of that. That's how soil gets built, and it returns nutrients into the forest and things like that. But you just, some amount of cleanup needs to happen, and there's a balance there. Again, it's all about continuity of fuels. You don't want large continuous clumps of small surface fuels, small twigs and things like that. So, we clean up a little bit and leave a little bit. Large downed wood. That's another thing I run into a lot is when we're doing fuels reductions, people will have old logs that are, mostly rotten. And those are, again, good for the soil. So as long as they're not in large piles or, just a continuous surface of big dead logs, I usually have people leave those, but usually not within 30 feet of the house. This is the 30 to 100 foot zone. Fuel storage, remove vegetation in at least a 10-foot radius out from your big propane tanks and things like that. Okay, how are we doing on time? Oh, wow. Okay, I had one more thing to show you guys. Jackson County Rural. So all this hold on a second. Stop. Share. Thanks for bearing with me, folks. It's a little. Sometimes I wonder if you're still there. I prefer to talk to you all in person so I can look at your faces. And,
we're here. We can see what you're doing. It looks good.
Good. Thank you.
Yep, that looks good.
I needed that encouragement.
Yep,
okay.
yep.
So are you guys seeing my Zoom bar on top of my screen?
Nope. It does.
Great.
Maybe there is a bar there. Yeah, I think that is blocking it.
Is it? Yeah, I have no idea how to get rid of that.
We can't see the controls. You might be able to drag it.
The Zoom bar?
Yeah.
Maybe there's a hide bar, hide controls, use subtitles. No, well.
It's not, it's just at the very top.
Okay, yeah, it'll be fine. So this is a slideshow I put together for a grant that I applied for and was successful in getting. But what we're looking at here is the South Oban Chain Fire. So my role on most fires these days is the air attack. I'm up in the air, kind of at the top of the stack, coordinating all the air tankers and the helicopters and giving intelligence to the guys on the ground and, kind of big picture of the fire. So after things had calmed down, I had the opportunity to take the door off the helicopter and fly over this property where I had worked with these landowners over the course of several years, multiple grant projects to do fuels reduction, and it was pretty stark. These folks were impacted on the first day of the South Oban Chain Fire, which was the same day as the Alameda Fire. 40 to 50 mile per hour winds with absolutely no support from firefighters. We just didn't have the resources. Everybody was in. Most of the aircraft were in Phoenix and Talent because of the threat to life and property. So these people had done a lot of preparation as a kind of a small little community, and then they also stayed at their property and luckily had power and water, and so they were able to protect several of these homes. But these pictures were taken just a week or two after the fire started. Some information about those fires. That's a footprint of the Oban Chain Fire. So it started down here And this cluster of green are the polygons of the fuels treatments. This is where the property is, right here. And then that's just kind of an aerial photo of the area that we're looking at. This house, this house, this house, and this house. And the green again is the fuels reduction work that I have record of. I know they did some outside of the grant as well. So these well-maintained fuel breaks, you could see all of these burned trees. The fire came from basically out here and came this way. So everywhere you see green corresponds with, that's this fuels reduction polygon right there. Oops. That's this house. So they, they removed the ladder fuels. They kept everything well maintained. And basically when the fire got to this point, it came down out of the crowns of the trees and just burned along the ground at a lower intensity. This is the house. You can see they have trees, and these are not, there's not 18 feet of space in between these tree crowns, but they removed the lower branches. This slope here was clean. If they had left, brush on this slope, these trees would have burned, the house would have burned. But they had it all clean. You could see these madrones. Madrones are pretty sensitive to fire. So for these madrones to still be green, the fire intensity must have been pretty low through here. And you could see how far apart they spaced their trees. This tree is probably 50 feet from the house. And then you see there's a clump of trees there, all hardwoods, which are pretty resistant to crown fire. So that's essentially the landscape that, there's the house right there. This is what the fire was doing before it got to this fuel break, this fuel break. All these green bands you see here are where they went and remove the brush, remove the ladder fuels, things like that. But, this is a 30,000 acre fire, and you can see it was just burning every single thing in its path because all of this was essentially untreated, and it's been excluded from fire for 100 years. This area typically used to see fire every 5 to 7 years. And then we started putting all the fires out, which we are learning was maybe not the best strategy. So here's another house in the neighborhood. Again, there's the fuel break. All these little white spots are hand piles. So they had gone through and thinned the trees, and then they had it piled waiting for the burn season, but they weren't able to do it. If you look up here though, there's no little white spots. So they did all this thinning and got the burning done. So this structure survived. If they had left all of these hand piles all the way up to the house, it may not have survived. Yeah, there's just a closer view of that house. Again, there's trees, they're pretty close. But there's a driveway, something. There's a driveway here, which helped. But if you look around the house, you see there probably was just bare dirt or really, really, really short grass. And that's kind of another good illustration of this community, this house that survived, this one, some green trees where they had done fuels reduction work. This band of green was all an oak woodland that they'd reduced the fuels in, which I thought was pretty cool.
Those are great pictures, Herb. That's really useful to see that.
Right. And then, so this is just, I'm showing the northern perimeter of the South Open Chain Fire. And again, all these fuels reduction polys we're looking at, what you'll notice is that the fire was stopped. The red is the fire perimeter. So the fire was stopped within these fuel breaks because again, the intensity came down, we were able to get in there real easy and put line in. So, you know, there was probably a house in here, which is why we have this little wow. Then again, you come over here and the fire stopped in a fuels reduction poly. And it did that all around the perimeter of the fire. I think there was about 11 of these grant funded fuel breaks. Here's another one on Derby Road. And again, all these green trees, they had done a bunch of fuels reduction work in here. You get up here where the work stopped and, you know, it just burned and did a lot more damage. And that's kind of there's a dozer line where they stopped the fire. And this is what, you know, what the fire had to continue to burn into. Had it not stopped here, you could see the brush. It had a long ways to go. And that's just the grant boundary. It's fire history. So this is only since 2018. This is Butte Falls out here, Elk Creek drainage. This area sees a lot of fire. And
So when you say grant boundary, you mean that's an area where ODF has funding to help people do fuels reduction, right? A strategic implementation area, or?
yeah, it's it's a community assistance grant. That in particular one is. So how much you say we still have quite a bit of time for questions?
So yeah. Oh yeah. The class is through 7:30. So
okay, perfect.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so a few things that are going on. If any of you followed Senate Bill 762, there's a lot of exciting stuff going on with that. You know, there was some recognition that fires are getting worse. Fire seasons are getting longer. Fires are getting larger. You know, there's drought, just a lot of different things, insect and disease killing trees. So yeah, what we're up against is also a buildup of fuels. Like I said, you know, Smokey Bear, we love him, and we do want to keep human-caused fires to the absolute minimum. You know, accidental human-caused fires, but we're recognizing and you know, a lot of scientists are doing research. There's a presentation called the Era of Megafires, which is pretty informative on that subject. But there's just a lot more fuel in the forest. There's a lot more trees than there used to be. We talked about Native and Indigenous peoples at the beginning of this. They also did a lot of you know, intentional ignitions to maintain rangeland for deer and elk. There's just this area and a lot of areas throughout the West have been adapted to fire from an ecology standpoint. And we've excluded fire due to, you know, just being really successful at putting fires out. The Forest Service used to have the 10 a.m. rule, which means every fire that starts, put it out by 10 a.m. the next day. And so excluding that has kind of made the fuels a little bit out of balance. There's more fuel in the forest. It's warmer. You know, areas of drought are occurring, especially down here in Southwest Oregon and Klamath Falls. Even when the rest of the state is doing okay, there's just this bubble down here where we're not doing okay as far as water goes. So I forgot why I started talking about that. I apologize. When we were talking about fuels reduction grants. Oh yeah, Senate Bill 762. Thank you. So there's been some recognition and some movement in the Oregon government. Most of the grant funds we've been giving out to landowners and a lot of these programs have all been federal funding, but the state of Oregon has decided to put some skin in the game and tackle this issue with state funds. So Senate Bill 762 allotted $50 million for this biennium towards fuels reduction. And then they've also expanded ODF's capacity a little bit. We hired a prescribed fire coordinator, which is just fantastic. We're going to look at, increasing the buzz is increasing the pace and scale of forest restoration activities. What does that mean? It means going out and thinning trees. In some areas, we're transitioning to more drought tolerant species. And if any of you have been to the Collins Forest or are planning to go there, there's a lot of great demonstrations on what this looks like in practice. So through that program, the Senate Bill 762, there's going to be some rules. The State Fire Marshal's Office is going to be redefining the wildland urban interface and then creating some codes. So a lot of this stuff might be like statutorily required as far as defensible space around your home. And then they made money available for fuels reduction. And down here, Southwest Oregon is the most at risk from fire part of the state. So they gave this area quite a bit of that funding. So that being said, we have also some federal dollars, which is mainly what I'm dealing with, because those were the pots of money that were available when we were applying for grants. So we have that area that we're looking at there is basically Shady Cove Trail, Butte Falls, all the way down to Highway 140. And that's one of our grant areas where we're doing assessments for people and reimbursing people $500 per acre to do fuels reduction work. I also have the Rogue River Weimar area. That grant is winding down. I should have funding in the Applegate pretty soon. And then through Senate Bill 762, there's a bunch of money available in the Applegate for landowners along specific evacuation routes. If you live on the outskirts of Phoenix and Talent and have some acreage, I'm sure there's people in this class who have probably participated in some of those programs in the West Bear area, in the hills west of Phoenix and Talent. There's just all kinds of different pots of money going on out there. So I would encourage people to give us a call or give OSU Extension a call, because I'm pretty sure they are the ones that are handling a lot of the collection of interested landowners for that West Bear area. Loma Katsi Restoration Project is doing a lot of the work, but there's a ton of opportunities out there right now for people to do fuels reduction and get some reimbursement, or in some cases have it done by a crew for minimal cost. That's a whole nother presentation, I'm sure, but if you like, we can take some questions.
Yeah, so folks, if you can feel free to ask any questions. You can just, I'm not seeing questions directly in the chat, but if you want to raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask a question, or share an insight. I know my husband's house burned down in the Almeida fire, and he was there all day, and it was just completely overwhelmed. There were not people. It was just the weirdest thing to watch house after house burn down. One of the things that came up in our, and that I don't think you mentioned, I might have missed it in a distracted moment, but the evacuation plan, I think, is a really good thing to think through beforehand, kind of what to bring. And there are good resources for that. But some folks I know, my husband's across the street neighbors, they left things in a fire safe. And there were so many fire safes that were, I don't know what level those fire safes are fireproof for, but it's not your house burning down.
Yeah, no, most of them they say 1200 degrees for like 45 minutes. But it still gets real hot inside there. yeah, it's not enough. It's not enough.
Here's a question. Wouldn't the Trex decking melt?
Yeah. So if you apply, everything's combustible if you apply enough heat to it, but Trex decking is much more resistant to embers than wood. So, what we're thinking about is really things that burn houses, and things that we can mitigate are the embers and like low intensity, little ground fire creeping up and then getting into your house, which most wooden building materials, once they get burning, will burn very well and very hot and for a very long time. So the Trex decking, embers land on it, and it might, melt a little bit into it, but it's so dense, it doesn't really sustain combustion. It's very resistant to combustion. There's some woods, there's some woods that are also super combustion resistant as well. But I'm sure they're very expensive. I think they're all like Brazilian woods. Looks like we have a hand up.
Yeah. Hi, Herb.
Hey.
I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Luke Wimmer, and I don't really have a question as much to just hop on. And you were talking about sources of funding for landowners who want to do defensible space work on their property. And I'm managing a FEMA grant in the city of Ashland with Ashland Fire and Rescue. That is just another source of funding for if we have any homeowners in Ashland. There's a cost share program that reduces your costs by 75% to do all the activities you just covered, and I just wanted to tack that on. I can throw my email in the chat if there is anybody interested in contacting me, but
Yeah, that'd be great, Luke. Is that, I heard a rumor that there were folks, a handful of Cedar Roofs in town, and that funding could be applied to replacing that kind of roofing?
Yeah, the Cedar Shake roofs. There was about 23 roofs pre-identified in Ashland that will get money towards replacing those with fire-resistant roofs. As well as, I should say, that there's like 1,100 predetermined properties that are eligible for this funding. So it's quite a few.
That's great. So we had a question about that specific checklist that you were sharing. Is it possible to get a PDF of that to share with people? I know there are a lot of that sort of checklist, and I shared some options, but that had some nice things like about the how to kind of evaluate if you're on a slope and those kinds of things.
Yeah. It's a draft. But yeah, I'd be more than happy to share it out. Like I said, I basically just brain dumped everything I knew to Kara Baylog, and she developed that sheet. So as soon as we're both happy with it, yeah, I'm sure we could definitely share it out.
Okay. Well, and there really are on the Firewise website. There are definitely home ignition zone checklists. I shared one that we developed, based on all this kind of knowledge, also for the Land Steward program that has, bulleted information in the beginning and then kind of going through that home ignition zone. So there are a lot of resources. Also, for developing your kind of evacuation plan. Again, having gone through it and being under. I was at level 2 evacuation orders while Talent and Phoenix were burning down. And I really realized at that moment of being really concerned about somebody who was in the fire and worried about myself and my daughter, that when you're in that really scared moment, it's very hard to think clearly. And even I had a list and I went through my list, and some things I got, but there were some things on there I was not nearly detailed enough. Like I had art on my list and I was like, what am I thinking? What kind of art? I don't need art.
So the program and the Jackson and Josephine County Emergency Management are kind of the experts on evacuation, but it's the program is Be Ready, Be Set, Go. And basically everyone should go into fire season in level 1 evacuation status, which means, you know, you're ready. You have some things identified, you know, that you would take with you. And then level 2 evacuation, if you have that time, which Almeda Fire, we went from level 0 to level 3 in about 10 minutes. But you know, if you put in a level 2, it's like put the stuff in the car. And then level 3, you know, put the stuff in the car, have it facing out, and then level 3 is go. But yeah, you know, there's a lot of good information through the county emergency management about disaster planning and evacuation preparedness. I'm certainly not prepared at my house.
Yeah, and you know,
I'm fire safe. I'll be fine.
Yeah, another anecdote of that. Again, from my husband's experience, he had a friend who was across the street from where the house was burning, and he was, if Talent Avenue, you know, was kind of the barrier, and he was in a house, and he watched his house, which had, you know, kind of like the cement kind of siding, so it had nice fireproof siding, and he saw it rebuffing the flames, you know, and their house is burning right next to you, so that's a real tremendous fuel heat source. But
Yeah.
eventually a window broke, and then he saw the fire just roll on in.
Sure, and that's a good it brings up a good point that I didn't mention is the whole concept of a Firewise community, especially, you know, the program was developed with kind of like a subdivision in the middle of a pine forest in Colorado. And when the houses are that close together, if everybody in the community doesn't take those actions, one of those houses catches on fire, the radiant heat from a house is by far the biggest threat to the neighboring structures. And once you start having structure to structure fire spread, it becomes extremely difficult to stop that. So yeah, that's the, you know, Firewise community is people who all have to come together, and every single house in there has to do everything they can to prevent those ignitions from happening.
And Michelle has her hand up.
Hi, I'm in the Detroit Lake community, and we lived in a neighborhood where it all got burned. And we did have Firewise, you know, once a year where everybody rake up their sticks and whatnot, but we had so many trees, big trees, skinny trees close together. It wasn't a matter of if, it was when. And I couldn't believe it happened, you know, sooner than I expected. But we had cement siding, metal roof, but we stored our wood under our, where we parked, you know, it was covered so nicely. And had some trees very close to the house, but I know we probably burned the trees. But one thing we had was propane tanks. We had 2 propane tanks that were close to the house. What do you suggest? Because we don't have natural gas out there. What do you suggest to do with those?
So with propane tanks, I think the best thing you can do is keep it 10 feet, at least 10 feet out from the propane tank where it's just completely non-combustible. Gravel, you know, nothing underneath it, no brush or anything within 10 feet. Because what propane tanks do is they'll vent and it'll shoot a spout of fire. But then eventually what happens is that's like a fail-safe mechanism. And then eventually what happens is the valve will shut and it'll stop spouting fire. But if there's a lot of fuel that's continually heating that propane tank for a long period of time, then they can explode. So yeah, I would say just, you know, clean out 10 feet away on all sides. And then it shouldn't catch fire unless, you know, they're close to your house and your house catches fire, but they can withstand a decent amount of heat before they do ignite. A lot of people also will bury their propane tanks, which is an option.
Thank you.
You could enclose it, but then, I mean, that's almost worse, I think, to have an enclosure, a wooden enclosure over it. You know, maybe like a brick or some non-combustible thing to protect it from radiant heat could help you out. But yeah, they're not as big of a culprit for burning houses as you would think. They're more of a danger to firefighters, especially I've seen people that decided to hide their propane tank by stacking all their firewood around it. Yeah, encase them in concrete block. Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's see. Someone asked me, Brian Hendricks asked me, what's the most common thing I see around homes that I would recommend people take immediate action on during fire season? That's a tough one, but I think probably the most common thing I see is landscaping under windows and just too close to the house with bark mulch under it. That's probably, and then Leland Cyprus in more kind of, you know, in town. A lot of folks and developers used to plant Leland Cyprus as a screen between the houses. And you know, that stuff is really flammable, and it gets way too big to be planting anywhere near your house.
Or Italian cypresses are those long, those tall, skinny ones. Those are another one that's often in an urban landscape. And I know my fire person said that's like a Roman candle. I had, when I bought my house, I mean, I still have things to do at my house as well, but I had Leland cypress, Italian cypress, and arborvitae, and those are all gone now.
Oh, good. Yeah, the arborvitae, it's not as flammable when it's green, but what happens is if you open it up, it's got like this big column of dead needles in the middle of it.
Right.
And that's why it burns.
Yeah, right. Or and the like prostrate juniper, the juniper shrubs are that way. When people will burn them, I mean not burn, but trim them, you can see that inside that's all just air and dead material, just like the blackberries were in the on Bear Creek. Let's see here.
Molly has a hand up.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Molly.
Yeah, this is along the same lines as somebody that was talking about propane, but we live kind of in the middle of our 5 acres, and I feel like we're pretty good here. We evacuated for Almeida, but I don't think I would do that again, just because we're pretty isolated from other properties, and we have not a lot of trees. But we, because we're on a well, we have gasoline to run a generator for the next time if there was ever another fire, because we didn't have power, and then we didn't have water. How do you store gasoline tanks? We don't have the, you know, big metal ones. We have those. How do you store those away? Because they're in the garage, which doesn't really seem like a great idea during fire season.
You know, indoors is okay if you adhere to those you know, home ignition zone Firewise principles. You know, if your gasoline tanks are inside, they're not going to burn until your structure's on fire, and then, you know, it's not really a whole lot worse.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and
they're in the garage close to. We don't put cars in the garage, but they're in the garage closest to the garage door, you know, away from the other part of the building. So maybe that is the best place for them to be.
Yeah, you know, I think the chances of the gasoline igniting inside your garage is not great. Just something to think about is radiant heat can sometimes transmit through like the garage door without igniting it. So if it's up against the door, you know, but even then, like it takes an actual decent amount of flame and heat to actually ignite gas.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, that
Some
makes
things that happen, like people with cars in carports, you know, your car can be an ember receptor depending on, you know, if you have like a soft top or something like that. Or people will have like, you know, they'll park in their driveway and they've got like a little bit of grass stubble or something. Once that grass stubble gets to the tires, it ignites the tires and then the car will burn the house down. But if you're parked on gravel or a concrete slab, it's probably okay.
That's great information too. And I just have to say those pictures of the open chain fire, that was so informative. Thank you so much for sharing those.
Yeah, no problem. I was really glad to have the opportunity where it all just lined up, where it's like, you know, the property I knew, and then just to see like, oh wow, this stuff works. It was pretty cool. It was reaffirming.
Yeah, that's the fabulous thing. I know sometimes for some of our classes, Max shares a picture of a forest where they had done a fuel break, and it was a crown fire where they hadn't, and then it just drops to the ground and the trees are green in the fuel break, and then it comes right back up into the crown and continues to burn the forest. So really, without having that kind of column of fuel from the ground up through the trees, it can really make a difference. I mean,
it's huge.
At 6% humidity and 45 mile an hour, but it's the open chain pictures that's showing that even under those conditions, that still was helpful. Yeah, so that's great. One thing that has been helpful to me that people have pointed out is looking at, and this kind of gets to the carport issue. It's pretty common to have an open carport, and we all store stuff under the carport because we need to, but that first video that you showed of the embers, you know, we think of, oh, little sparks, how much harm can they do? But you got to think of like a storm of embers, and where in your carports or your deck or whatever, where do the leaves gather? And that's where those embers are going to gather, and they'll kind of eat away and catch if it's dry and hot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Embers, that's what'll get you. And like I said, they can travel. The open chain fire, I think it's the longest spotting distance I've ever seen it. It spotted like 3 miles ahead of itself.
Yeah, and those were not just embers, but like fire brands. So pieces with those, like what's behind you in your picture there, that intense uplift. It can be whole burning branches or chunks of burning asphalt roof that from houses that have already ignited, and then those can really just get thrown. And that was amazing.
Those convection columns, when you see a big chunky straight up vertical like plume, the amount of energy going into those is pretty impressive. It'll pick up logs and loft it, you know, 3,000 feet into the air.
Right.
It's powerful.
Yeah, so having done what you can to prepare and what, what's there for those things to land on, that was interesting what you said. That really makes a difference. Any other questions? We have just a couple minutes more. Any burning questions, so to speak? I know one of the other things that's hard to remember is that really often in a fire like that, the power goes out, and very often if you don't have power, you don't have water. So if you're thinking of sprinkling or something, then you got to think about that, like just like Molly was saying, have the generator. And I know in her case, and in a lot of people's cases, they didn't have water for a long time, but she had a swimming pool. So that was then a source of water for animals and things afterwards. So not everybody can do that, but those are circumstances that can happen.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, hopefully that was helpful. I think as a closing, I would throw out also, that was Brian's question was a good one. You know, people can also, I see people get overwhelmed, go through the checklist and be like, oh my God, I can't do any of this. So where do I start? But also you can't, chances are there won't be a fire at your house this year. So like just start working on it, and every year do a little bit more, do what you can.
Yeah. Start with the first 30 feet. They did research in Canada, and really your home will sustain or will survive the radiant heat from a raging crown fire like the one behind me, as long as it's separated by 30 feet. So that's the most critical is that first 30 feet, and then, you know, work your way out from there. But,
Yeah, that's a good
little bit at
pointer.
a time.
That's a good pointer. Start close and work
Yep.
out, right? Gary Kraus says, have a roof sprinkler system and a portable generator in your pump house.
Sure.
Until he's been thinking, oh, he had another good point, a way of phrasing it. He said, it's a good idea to know the kindling point of your plants. So thinking of the plants that are around your house and if, you know, where would they start and try to fix that spot.
Uh-huh. Yep. It's usually the dead material that accumulates underneath it.
All right. Well, you've got some nice thank yous in the chat there.
Great.
Thanks for joining us this evening, and I'll process the recording and get you all a link at some point tomorrow.
Excellent.
Thank you, Herb. Really appreciate it. Thanks
Yep.
for joining us and
Glad I could
rallying.
make it.
Yeah, good. Okay. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye.